Okay. Tuesday edition of the After Show. Got Weekend Justice with you week over here on the East Coast.
And Justice over here on the west coast of the contiguous United States of America.
Okay.
It is a red sky at Morning Tuesday here on the After Show. And it only means one thing, of course, that it's Tuesday. And the refraction of light on the horizon portends that a storm is a-brewing. And if it's not a red sky where you're at, just trust me, there's a red sky somewhere in the world.
Yes.
So take care. Make sure you have a sweater. Right. Hey, Wink, how you doing?
Not bad. It is a little drizzly. It's 49 degrees, going up to about 54, 55 today. So it's a little bit warmer day today. But then as we head toward the end of the week, it gets back down to the teens, 17, 18. So this is a little glitch in the week's weather, I guess. But mind you, get the chat, just go to netrootsradio.com, scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that. Join us there.
And to the leftish of the chat room link, of course, are the donate buttons. And thank you for your generosity in that, indeed. After show pods can be had by way of Spreaker.com as what we call the raw data file. Comes up pretty immediately. And then the perfected file, the cleaner one, comes up on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, etc., a little bit after. Right. So thank you, folks, for downloading those, too, by the way.
Yes.
Well, week here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. It is currently 36 degrees. It's a little drizzly here also. All the snow that we had, at least at my elevation, has melted away. There is certain to be lots of snow in the upper hills around where I'm at. And I'll be able to corroborate that as soon as the low-lying fog lifts off. So, but that's how it's going to be. It's going to rain most of the day. Actually, we will be a bit warmer. We're going to get into the low to mid 50s today. So so I don't know. Maybe we're marching to spring. You never know. Well, I woke up this morning and realized that we're not nuclear dust, so it's another day of being outraged by, I don't know, the guy at the top. You know what? I always stayed away from employers like a Donald Trump. The arbitrariness of it, I don't know. I guess it takes a certain kind to be able to deal with it. On the other hand, if you're just in a place that is branded by him, right? Right. There's some question about how much oversight they have coming in and telling you what to do, though there is that. I mean, they'll come in with a mission statement and, they may initially come in and expect certain, I don't know. What I've heard about Trump is that he and the family will come in and change some styling issues. But I suppose when you're working at a place, you don't really think about, quote, the owner, because that guy's not the owner. He's just put the sign up outside your place. Right? But I don't know. Even in those situations, I don't know if I'd. But I'm a white guy. I could do anything I want, right?
Right.
I don't.
Exactly.
I don't have to work in a place like that. So
right.
I guess that's my entitlement. I'm entitled enough to be able to say, well, I'm not working for that fool.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that don't have that choice. And I don't know. I still have friends, even at our age, who think that, if you got money, you have like some, link to the secret of the universe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It kind of cracks me up because any fool can make money.
Around.
Any fool can make money, and you can make more if you're willing to basically steal it from other people.
Yep.
And that's how that fellow measures his success, is how much he's able to take.
Right.
Which is, I got to say, kind of like un-American in the America I grew up in. Ask
Indeed.
not.
Yeah. Yep.
Ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Remember that?
Yep, you do.
So, but hey, these are the issues we will be attending to today because it is Tuesday and we're going to visit with Chris Reeves as we do every Tuesday. So I want to get through the top half. We have to do that at least. This is a very sad story, and I really mulled going over it, but it has to be attended to, and it is. Tragedy strikes after a mother pleads with a pawn shop owner to not sell another gun to her mentally ill daughter. Yeah, well, she has a right now, doesn't she? A parasitic business model thrives on Facebook as vampire web pages suck content from legitimate, progressive news sites. Huh. Interesting. I don't really get my news on Facebook. I don't use that platform for that. It's more sort of like a bulletin board for family, and mine's public, so I have some friends that listen to the show or follow us in other fashion over there. But for the most part, it's just like extended family and friends. Friends of family, that kind of thing. It can get pretty unwieldy.
Oh yeah,
even in that.
Yep.
But I'm not getting my news there. But apparently, Facebook is a big site for a lot of that, and these vampire web pages that literally suck content, they do it without attribution. Huh. Wow. I guess we're in the wrong business, Wink. Damn.
Apparently. Yeah.
I guess so. And this just came up as a report today, though the fellow behind it had made it known last night late. And that is... And this comes from a former NSA analyst. Domestic and foreign spy agencies say the White House is targeting journalists with help. Yeah, that's right. With Russian intelligence. Yep. Whole brave new world we live in, Wink. And it was just, I haven't liked vodka in a long time. I guess I'm going to have to start liking it again. Damn. All right. For the last half, as I mentioned earlier, we will visit with Chris Reeves, always affectionately known as Tom Servo 433 around here. And we're going to get an update on the Kansas Supreme Court ruling that the state does not properly fund public schools. A couple of GOP folk in both Kansas and Missouri say that poor people don't want health care because minimum wage was never meant to be livable. I always like mixing political metaphors, especially on Tuesday. And the Montana Democratic Party selects a true poet-philosopher cowboy to run in the special election. Because that seat's being vacated for the fellow that's going to be running the Interior Department into the ground. Did you know that Montana is just one district, Wink? Just one congressional district. One big one.
Yeah, because there's only about 10 people that live out there.
Yeah, so that's right.
You got
hard to even get a quorum. It's hard to get a quorum.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I'm serious.
Yep.
Yikes. Well, all that plus the Connect Unite Act Daily Coast community calendar and more on the after show with that ever so fine fellow over there on the East Coast with his East Coastal elitism, and it exists. He hides it so well, and his name is Wink. And this guy all the way back over here, and there's no hiding my elitism. I make it, known, as you can see. And my name is Justice, and we do this 5 days a week for an hour-ish in the specific tear on the fabric of space-time because who loves you, baby? And as Columbo would say, one more thing. Oh, and just one more thing. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, do we want another Comey over? I like that. I worked all weekend on that week. Comey over.
I like it.
But I don't know. How will these things get investigated, and who is supposed to initiate them? It's a little different from Watergate. There's a lot of similarities there, but it's a little different. And I will say this. I don't know what it says about the man, the persona, or even what it says about his sycophants who are there within his personal being, and further what it says about the people who voted for him, that find no issue with accusing the former president of the United States that just preceded him with a felony. Who does that? Who allows that? Who is not outraged by that? We couldn't even get impeachment on the table for Bush. Let alone, I mean, yeah, we joked, wouldn't it be great if we could, like, frog march Cheney and Bush to the Hague? Like that would ever happen. But it's certainly frightening with this fellow because he has a prison guard apparatus at the ready. Doesn't he? In the true Stanford experiment sense. They work with such zeal now, taking brown people away. How hard would it be to track down the former president of the United States and haul him in front of, I don't know, the People's Court? Sieg Heil? Yeah, look up People's Court. We're not talking about Judge Wapner here.
Right.
I'm talking about the first and real People's Court. And I always thought it was weird that a Judge Wapner would be like the judge for our People's Court, that funny little thing that we had on TV. But the People's Court in Nazi Germany was an insidious and evil construction. And it seems to me that we have individuals who see no problem with enacting that, charging essentially Obama with a felony. Yeah, I'm pissed. All right. Got to get through these aren't terribly long stories. And the reason for it is because even with this first one, you know where it's going. You know, it's hard in this situation to not tell the story while you're telling it, not to give it away. Right. I'm sorry, but it's. And this is by Sarah P. out of Crooks and Liars. Gun control proponents have been fighting for tougher laws related to the sale of guns for decades. One major sticking point that almost everyone except for the National Rifle Association can agree on is that the mentally ill should not have access to guns. But what does mentally ill mean? Do they have to have a criminal record, a serious medical diagnosis? Who reports this mental illness to the background check companies, the ATF, police? And what qualifies as a mental illness severe enough to be denied a gun? Depression, schizophrenia, bipolar? What if they are medicated and fully functioning? Would that allow them to purchase a gun and then own it? What if they go off their medicine? Who takes the gun back? So many questions. But the idea has always been to try to err on the side of caution. Or that was the hope. Gun shows always find loopholes, and many stores, retailers circumvent the whole background check thing. And just a few weeks ago, the House of Representatives killed an Obama-era gun rule specifically designed to keep guns away from the mentally ill. Fantastic! So what actually happens when a mentally ill person gets a gun? Hopefully nothing. But often something does happen. Maybe they commit suicide. Maybe they threaten people. Maybe they get self-destructive and shoot things. Sometimes it is even more tragic. In Wellington, Missouri, a truly awful story unfolded. A mother desperately called the ATF, the police, and the local gun shop to warn them about her mentally ill daughter in hopes of preventing her from buying a gun. The Washington Post shared her painful story of mental illness, desperation, death, and a family torn apart by one bullet. A bullet that could have been prevented. Janet Delana knew her daughter was a danger to herself and others. In and out of hospitals after a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, she struggled on medication, was barely functioning, and showed dramatic signs of impairment. She survived on disability insurance and was being cared for by her parents. Just a month before she bought a gun and had tried to kill herself. Just a month before she had bought a gun and had tried to kill herself. Her father, Janet's husband, took the gun away. But her next month disability check was coming, and her mom knew that she would probably try to buy a gun again. Desperate, she made phone calls to try to stop the disaster. She called Odessa Gun and Pawn, the pawn shop where Colby, her daughter, had last bought the gun that she tried to commit suicide with. Wink. Think of this. I'm begging you, Delana said through tears. I'm begging you as a mother. If she comes in, please don't sell her the gun. Of course, this is on tape, too, by the way. Recorded on her phone while they're calling back and forth. The store owner was not swayed, and when Colby came in, he sold her a high-point pistol and a box of ammunition for $257.85. Total profit for the store, $60. $60 profit, Wink. $60. Colby went home. She loaded the gun. She walked in and saw her dad sitting at the computer with his back to her. She shot him as he sat, unaware. She killed her father. Delana lost her husband. She tried valiantly to prevent it from happening, but the store did not heed her warnings. After everything I did, they still sold her the gun. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. I wanted someone to pay. So she sued Odessa Gun and Pawn for negligence in June of 2012. The Washington Post reports that the Missouri Supreme Court said that nothing in federal law barred Delania's type of lawsuit. Under state law, the court ruled that dealers could be held liable if they should have known a buyer was dangerous. Last fall, with a trial set to start in January in the wrongful death case, the gun shop settled with Delana, saying it had followed the law and done nothing wrong. $60. After phone calls in a personal level saying, look, you sold her a gun before and she tried to kill herself with it. Well, let's listen to what the gun shop owner had to say in his depositions, and let's remember they finally settled. This story is particularly heartbreaking because the family not only tried to get help for their daughter, but actively tried to prevent the tragedy from occurring. They are not gun control advocates. In fact, they own guns and were supporters of legal ownership. What they didn't want was their daughter, someone who was severely mentally ill and suicidal and homicidal, to get a gun. They did everything right. And the gun sale laws failed them. Now a person is dead. The gun shop owner tried to justify his actions by saying in a deposition, I can't just go by what a phone call says. If a person comes in and passes a background check, I can sell them a gun. So he settled with Delana for $2.2 million. Pay me now or pay me later. He got $60, but now he has to pay $2.2 million. And this is what they settled for. So think about that for a moment. They settled for $2.2 million. I don't think it's putting the guy out of business.
Right. It'll be all right.
This type of settlement is a significant victory for gun control advocates who want to change the way in which gun sellers and manufacturers can be held accountable for when their products are used. Jonathan E. Lowy, the legal director for the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence, argued Delana's case and said the following. This type of case sends a powerful message to the gun industry nationwide and to the companies that insure them that if you supply a dangerous person with a gun, you will pay the price. There are similar cases pending in numerous states. This case, horrific as it is, may open up new legal avenues for victims of crime to pursue action against gun manufacturers and sellers who knowingly allow the mentally ill to purchase firearms, regardless of the background check laws. And this case does hinge upon intent and knowledge of a potential danger. This just didn't come out of the blue. Yeah, he's blaming it on a phone call. But we're not talking about a real phone call here. We're talking about not just a phone call. We're talking about many phone calls and actual personal pleas as well, in person. And that was held up in court. That's another reason why they settled. I better hurry up. Okay. This is by Stephen Rosenfeld and Ivy Olson out of Alternet. Some new media vampires on the internet block are pilfering content from independent journalism websites and deceitfully posting it as their own on Facebook, the premier social media platform. Well, that's questionable. But it's big. These Facebook pages and their affiliated websites pose as progressive champions, but their content is largely copied, if not outright plagiarized, from legitimate news and opinion outlets with real reporters and analysts, not rewrite teams. Their goal appears to be making money by attracting millions of readers as unknowing users click on links or share their memes, photos with slogans, because viewer traffic generates advertising revenue via Google ads. We don't have those, but we might one day. And we try to be very on top on attribution here. Of course, in my zeal to be entertaining, I jump in with one in this reporter's opinion, and hopefully people can discern when the jokester is interjecting, shall we say.
Yeah. Yep.
And but citation is very important. And if we are actually generating news, we'll let you know. But we'll let you know even more when we're doing a news read like we do every day.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with these other pages that are being cited here, is that there is no attribution. The links don't go to the original story. They go to sister sites. It's a closed circle, and it sounds suspiciously like maybe what's that Macedonian teenage group that made a bunch of money because the right-wing people just couldn't stop clicking on stuff? I wonder. Makes you wonder, right? Makes you wonder. That market dried up, but they're still progressive. They don't do it as much. You can't get as much money out of progressives. But when that market's dried up, you go where, if you're a bottom feeder, you find another bottom to feed off of. So there is a link to this Alternet article. It actually has screenshots as comparisons, and they're very compelling. And we can't really do it justice, no pun intended, here on the radio. But let me just scroll down very quickly for the last. Oh, boy. Okay. All right. So, well, once again, I would suggest let's just go to the link that are in the show notes, and you can get to the show notes by way of, surprisingly, the Networks Radio Facebook page. And that will take you to my Daily Co's page and diary, where I have the actual links highlighted, which you can find these stories. So funny how that works.
Yes. Well, that's one good thing about the FB is you can post it right there.
I also got a request, and I need to talk to the crew about this, and I'm just mentioning this publicly because we need, we're on it. But I did get a request if there's a way to get those links, in a diary format with the highlighted links like we have now on something else. I guess I need to start doing my blogspot page again. That's been rather dormant for a while. So I probably should put them there because hyperlinks copy and paste very easily between the platforms. So
right.
Maybe I should do that, and then I'll post that up as a link on the Facebook page too for folks to get to quite easily. Okay. Now, this is a quite short article summing up here for the top half before we go into break. This just broke in a much more wide format just after David's show started. It is by David Edwards, or by way of David Edwards from Raw Story. A former NSA National Security Advisor analyst, John Schindler, who is now a national security columnist for The Observer, reports today that his sources in the intelligence community believe that Donald Trump's White House is colluding with Russian intelligence to target journalists. In a tweet early Tuesday morning, Schindler revealed that he, this is quote, learned from very reliable intelligence community sources that the Trump White House, with help from Russian intel, is targeting U.S. journalists. Although Schindler provided no additional details, it's no secret that Trump has all but declared war on the media during his first 45 days in office. However, the president has embraced conservative media sources like Fox News, Breitbart, InfoWars, and various other right-wing blogs. In one case, the White House tried to punish political reporter Alex Eisenstadt by planting a false story accusing him of laughing at the death of a Navy SEAL. Trump has called the media fake news and an enemy of the people. Now let that sink in. We reported on this when it happened.
Yes.
They planted a false story to smear Alex Eisenfeld for basically reporting on possible, I don't even think it was a Russian connection, it was just something else. And this was his punishment. That he laughed at a Navy SEAL's death. You know, the one that's died in Yemen.
Right.
Well, that's what it was about. It was about the whole Yemen raid. Eisenstadt had reported that Trump made the decision over dinner. And there's photographs to prove it. Fake news doesn't tell the truth. Trump told a group of conservatives last month it doesn't represent the people. It does and never will represent the people. And we are going to do something about it. Okay. Well, this is a developing story, and I was hesitant about bringing it up because it is such inflammatory and breaking. But I think dangerous times require, some responses, don't we? All right, let's get to our Gem Hightower break, and we'll come back and go through the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Codes community calendar, and then have our discussion with Chris Reeves. That's right. You're listening to the After Show on Netroots Radio with Wink and Justice, and we will be right back.
Trump and company claim to have a sweeping mandate from voters. But wait, almost half of the electorate chose not to vote last November. Only 25% of voters actually cast their ballots for Trump. 26% chose Clinton. 60% of those who did vote for Trump said they don't trust him. Some mandate. Here's another fact. Those of us fighting for populist justice are stronger than we've been in decades. But how can that be, since Trump is in the White House? Because the vast majority of people agree with the ideals and ideas of progressive populism, not with Trumpism. Even most of his supporters were not voting for what they're about to get, a plutocratic, autocratic agenda that'll steamroll the working class and poor. Trump was not elected on issues, but on anger. A lot of Trump voters simply heard him speaking one truth repeatedly. The system is rigged by and for the elites. That's true. So the riggees, furious at being flattened by the corporate and political powers, saw Trump as a big bodark stick that they could grab to thump the whole smug establishment upside its collective head. However, far from alleviating their anger and despair, Trump is already betraying them, as revealed by the actual proposals he's making and the people he's brought inside the White House. Remember his promise to drain the swamp in Washington? Instead, he's filled it with a new slew of creepy, crawly swamp creatures like Jeff Sessions, Steve Mnuchin, Rex Tillerson, Tom Price, Scott Pruitt, Betsy DeVos, and a mess of Wall Street insiders. These are career-long corporate hacks, not working-class champions. This is Jim Hightower saying, progressives not only need to resist the plutocratic agenda of these fraudsters, but also to put forth our true people's agenda and start rallying voters around it right now.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back. Thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Chris Reeves is in the vast plains of the vast Midwest of the United States. And our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the vast ethereal regions of the cloud, and whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Networks Radio, thus by extension the After Show, to span the globe, the solar system, out past the Oort cloud, and beyond. Okay. That's the anti-shock jock cadence there, Wink.
Yeah.
You go down instead of like up. Okay, today's Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Diary is facilitated by the fantastic, wonderful, and infamous cartoonist Eric Lewis.
Yes.
And he has a very salient opening in today's diary that probably would fit in well with any discussion that we would have with Chris Reeves, and that is volunteer recruitment strategies. I would suggest go to that diary and read about it. Is quite interesting, and it made me think, like when I was manning phones, what strategies work best for me. And maybe we'll get involved in that in just a moment, Chris. But first, let me remind folks that there is a new group forming, and that's the Wisconsin Cossacks, Wisconsin Cause. And Chris the Colladem is the person putting that group together. Cosmail him if you'd like to be part of Wisconsin Cause. San Francisco Cossacks are going to be joining up in concert with the DC Sister March in San Francisco this coming Friday at 5 p.m. near Civic Center. Cosmail Navajo, she and Meteor Blades are putting together this contingent. They're going to meet at Sam's American Eatery at 1220 Market Street between 8th and 9th at 4 p.m. to collect and be together as a group. And then they'll be marching to the Federal Building at 7th and Mission at 5 p.m. And it looks like they have a few RSVPs already. Colorado Community has their Caffeinating Liberally meetup every fourth Saturday of every month. This month it will be March 25th. And it's always at Common Grounds Coffee House, 44th and Vallejo in Denver from 9 a.m. to noonish at the table by the piano. Get a hold of Colorado Tim or Left Candid to RSVP RSVP for that. Navajo will be in town. Mark your calendars on Sunday, April 23rd. They always meet at Spitzer's Corner, 101 Rivington Street in the Ludlow District at high noon. Cosmail Navajo to RSVP because she's not only, her work never stops, even when it's for her. That's good, though. And also mark your calendars. Thinking Fella and Ojibwa have been organizing the 3rd annual Epic Glacier National Park meetup held between June 30th and July 2nd. There is a very important diary for very important planning details, but also get a hold of Thinking Fella and Ojibwa for that. And they have quite a few. They have scores of people going. And Networks Nation 2017, the Daily Co's annual Cheers and Cheers dinner will be held Wednesday, August 9th, 2017 at 5:30 p.m. Cosmail Navajo to RSVP for a seat at the table, and location will be determined, and that usually occurs after she knows how many people are going to be showing up. They sometimes have to get a venue bigger than the Netroots Nation venue just to hold the Cheers and Cheers. At least it seems that way.
Yeah,
All right, that is your Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast community calendar for the 7th of March of 2017. All right. Chris, it's been another big week. You know, I don't remember like time feeling like 100 years almost passed in a week during the Obama years. But boy, so much is packed in. You go a couple of days and things that used to not be old news are terribly old now. And to speak about what occurred a week ago seems almost like ancient history, but let's tackle it anyway. And there's a story that you wrote about last week, and actually I did find it still making the rounds and its implications in other states. But the Kansas Supreme Court ruling in the Gannon decision that the state has been woefully underfunding public schools, and that should send shockwaves. But by turns, it's a story that I find coming up on what we would consider, you know, our objective news sites. But even there, it's sort of buried and not above the lead. So I'll let you attend to all of this.
So the Kansas Supreme Court has considered Gannon, which was a lawsuit filed by several school districts around the state. And it had kind of a two-prong test. Well, really a three-prong, but two prongs that were handled by the court. And that was adequacy and equity. There's a requirement within the state constitution that says, hey, our state has to provide adequate and equitable education. Now, there's some reasons for that. First is pretty obvious. You want to make sure that a student who goes to school in school ABC gets a similar or comparable education to somebody who goes to public school, you know, XYZ. The reason for that is to make sure that one community isn't, you know, significantly outpacing other communities as far as educational opportunities, which would deny the idea of public education. The second part of it is adequacy, which is to make sure that, hey, the state is properly funding education at a level that can support what matches for an adequate education to compete in the current workforce. Okay. So those are the two prongs. Last year, there was a ruling that said, hey, the state failed the equity portion. The state had created a system whereas certain school districts had a inbuilt advantage, significant inbuilt advantage over other school districts. And so we had to do something to make the funding more equitable. And that was to provide more funding to schools that needed it. This year they ruled on the other portion, which was related to equity, which was related to adequacy, and that said that, hey, not only were you giving these schools favored treatment and these schools less favored treatment, but you were also not funding at any level that was manageable at all. So you have to come up with money. Now, here's the thing. As I've kind of written for, 4 years now, the state of Kansas is broke, really broke. In fact, we think that we're a couple $100 million in the hole. Well, add to that the fact that this ruling just came out, and the ruling says that the state now owes an additional, we think, about $540 million into education. Well, that's $540 million we don't have at all. And so now the state is going to have to come up with a quick way to come up with roughly $1.2 billion, because that's this budget year and next budget year, quickly. And we have a governor, and of course still Republicans, who view raising taxes as the equivalent of,
Well, it occurred to me, I keep thinking, well, this, this not just this particular incident, but in the last 4 years, say, that brownback, this is the issue that will, break the proverbial camel of Brownback's resolve and finally wake him up to the folly of his ways.
Yeah.
But it occurs to me that that's not the case. This is a feature, not a bug. I was going to make a joke. Well, Betsy DeVos has a plan, and that's to make school vouchers like Confederate bucks, and they have some sort of value, and that's how we'll fund it. And then it occurred to me, well, maybe if the schools are all unfunded and there's no way to fund them, then the private enterprise scheme will ride into town for the rescue. I mean, is this the gambit? I mean, how do we get out of this other than hopefully voting him and this ideology out of office?
Well, there's always some possibility of that you're talking about. The problem is so many of Kansas communities are so spread out and so small that there isn't a for-profit school there, and there also isn't one really possible.
Well, I don't think
you can't really
work.
form a for-profit school when you've only got 50 kids. And that
Remind me real quick. Now, in California, when property taxes, local property taxes funded schools, there was a issue about equity between school districts because obviously richer school districts could fund their schools at a greater and more efficient, profound rate than the poor district, a poor property valued area. And so then there were mitigations put in, or mitigating factors put into place to attend to that and make things equitable. But the other mitigating factor that came to the fore was that we're just going to defund all schools and property taxes are no longer part of this equation, and that's then how California fell from like first in the nation in education during the Wilson years, like in the 40th. Level. How does Kansas pay for their schools? It being spread out and with a low population, boy, if it's property taxes on people, the more acreage you have, boy, you're taking a big hit. Is it bond measures that are spread out over counties? How does it work?
Yeah, it's bond measures spread out county by county, school district by school district. There are also ancillary bonds, state pay. I mean, it just becomes kind of a giant patchwork of here's how to make it work. And that's the way it is in a lot of these states. And there's nothing by default wrong with that. It's just one that when people want to manipulate it in order to get certain results, they can. And in the case of Kansas, that's pretty much what's happened is you've set up where the state has decided to keep cutting, and so they wanted to push more onto the local communities, and that wasn't something that they could really do because of the way the law is written, and so now you're in the budget crunch that you're in.
Is there any tax on businesses or corporations that help fund schools?
Okay, so what Kansas does, which is certainly not very helpful, is that Kansas gives tax credits to businesses that provide scholarships to go to private Catholic or private schools. So if your business can give away up to, I can't remember the limit, but it's pretty big. The total state allowable is $10 million. But if your business decides to give away a couple $100,000 in scholarships to go to your local Catholic school, they can get tax credit for it. And so what does that do? Well, it cuts the amount of tax revenue coming into the state, and it gives it to entities that will never generate tax revenue. It's kind of a
nothing.
In the end, it's not necessarily a great plan.
On the other hand, if you look at the Catholic diocese business model, you get money coming in for the school that gives you some working capital in which to buy up property around your school, and that can buy, I don't know, in my Catholic school history, I always thought that was kind of a weird business model, because the richer the diocese, meaning how many people were actually enrolled in the school, also determined how much property they were buying up around the neighborhood. So I don't know if it does the same when it's more of a joke, because you don't want that either, because it takes away from the fabric of what makes us, a democratic republic. And that's an informed electorate, everybody taking part, rather than siloing ourselves off into our silos.
Exactly.
Yeah. So court says it has to be funded, but still some issue about how it will be funded. Is there any appeal for federal help? And is that just, I can imagine what kind of federal help will happen now, more dismantling, but anything like that in the offing?
Oh, I don't know if they even know. They're at a point where conservatives have hit a point where they aren't even really sure where the hell they go next. Pardon the language, but they don't know. And as a result, we don't know. And I think the next few months are going to be really difficult. We're already past what they call turnaround in Kansas. We're getting there in Missouri, and that means we're coming up on a point where, hey, budgets have to be submitted and these things have to be done. And we're just nowhere. Nobody's even made an attempt. So what happens next? I don't know if anybody knows. And that's gonna,
sounds to me like confusion reigns, because people wanted results, or elected officials of that particular mindset wanted results without thinking about what they're going to have to do after grooving on the rubble. And speaking of confusion, that brings us to our next topic. And so we're going to talk about two states here, Kansas and Missouri, and put these two stories together. And the first one about, I always find it, elected officials who are so quick to reference biblical scripture in which to, validate whatever draconian evil they want to impose on people.
Mm-hmm.
They're walking on thin water. If they're thinking they're going to walk on water, it's going to be very thin water. But coming on the heels of what we now know as the replacement plan, and really sticking it to poor people, this resonates somewhat, this mindset. So poor people don't want health care, and minimum wage was never meant to be livable. The confluence of these two, and coming with the under the aegis of this biblical scripture explanation for why we're doing this, it always offends me.
Yeah, so that's talking about Roger Marshall, who was over in Kansas, who made the statement that, poor people don't want insurance. When they have it, they abuse it because they only go to emergency rooms. What Marshall, who is a doctor, is not pointing out is the reason why people who are poor go to emergency rooms is because they know that in the period before insurance of any sort, emergency rooms could not turn them away. So the only place that they knew they could go to get health care if things were bad were to go to the emergency room. Otherwise, if you go anywhere else, you're going to have to pay money on the spot to see a doctor, which many of them didn't have right on hand. So his whole thing of, well, it's their fault for just going to emergency rooms is just ridiculous. The problem in Missouri is, of course, someone said we can't raise the minimum wage, or we won't support raising the minimum wage. in Kansas City and St. Louis, because you know what? In fact, I think his comment was something along the lines of, if you're raising a family and you're a grocery store bagger, that's your problem. That's also not how this works. There are lots of people who are in minimum wage posts, which, by the way, extend far beyond bagging groceries, who are trying to raise a family. And unless, they want to do something about it, or unless Republicans start handing out birth control and worrying about all that, and then they're supposed to be the party that says to people, hey, you're supposed to be able to have kids and et cetera, all this kind of stuff. So that argument is a problem. The other problem that he neglects is this one, and it's the big one. There are a huge number of jobs in America that are based on minimum wage plus $1 or whatever. So it's like, oh, I got hired as a clerk at a liquor store. Well, I get minimum wage plus $2. Well, if the minimum wage goes up, guess what? My wage goes up, even though I'm making more than minimum wage. And that's true in a lot of jobs. So it's really short-sighted to just say, oh, it only impacts these terrible people, or to really assume them as terrible people just because they're in a job that makes minimum wage.
See, that's the issue that has always bothered me, because first it was like we hear by turns that, why don't you get a job at McDonald's, you lazy hippie, or you lazy brown person, or whatever, right? And then you get a job at McDonald's, they go, oh, is that all you could get, is a job at McDonald's, you loser? It's this terrible attitude that, some humans need another human to kick so that the person kicking feels better for some reason. But this putting it on the poor people, like with Shabbat's coming out with this excuse that, poor people are going to have to choose between their iPhones and healthcare. It's like, talk about apples and oranges, I guess. But it's along the same belief. And there are some elected officials who absolutely believe this, that poor people are having steak and lobster dinners on Love Boat cruises, and they should spend their money on healthcare instead of that. And I'm like, it's just astounding that anybody would believe this drivel, but they do. And then they set policy predicated upon that. And I don't know. Getting back to the biblical scripture thing, I don't remember Jesus, even when he said, heal thyself, it wasn't, and I'm going to kick you also. I just don't get it. I'm sorry.
Well, the other thing is there's fewer jobs today between the $10 an hour jobs and the $25 an hour jobs. You don't have that $15, $16, $17 an hour job anymore. You just can't go to that. They're just not there.
Well, if we're going to also, this is the other thing, like, somebody bagging groceries is of less value in the labor pool than the person scanning. I get the hierarchy and all this, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're also talking about people who we think are making lots of money, like a bank clerk, who I think falls under that umbrella of minimum wage and maybe $1 or $2, right?
Right.
But that's certainly still not livable.
Well, what has happened is that we have taken the idea that what we've done is we've determined certain things are luxuries, and as a result, we treat anybody who has any of those luxuries as either a bad person or wasting their money. Or you mentioned Shavitz, of course, he's the one who said, well, these poor people with iPhones. Well, first, here's the reason why they have an iPhone. They have an iPhone because the cellular provider is giving them away for like 99 cents for a contract.
Right.
It's not a matter of they're out there blowing $500 to buy it outright.
Right.
They got the phone that they get on contract. But Shavitz, is like, blah, blah, blah. They're walking around with some fancy techno phone. Well, and here's the other thing. If he wants people to be able to get those good jobs, then guess what? They have to have tools that allow that to happen. That means they have to be able to, get a call, make a call, have access to potentially the app that their business works with. And that's not even big name businesses. Our local grocery store has their clerks have an iPhone or Android app that tells them all the sales that are going on in a store so they can help customers. I mean, that's just the direction the market is going.
Right.
So, but we've decided, hell, let's just shame people for having, I don't know, anything.
It's because of the failed policies. It's stereotypical as the way the lashing out occurs. I'm reminded of Malcolm X, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, "I have no compassion or mercy in me for a society that will crush a people and then blame them for not bearing up under the weight." And that's what we do. The victims of this policy are then the perpetrators of their own pain. It's just, it's classic. But let's talk about something a little bit more uplifting. I hope. Now, my dad is quite an expert on cowboy poets of the West, and I've seen this name in my dad's collection. But I got to tell you, that's not my forte, and I just give it a passing nod. But this fellow Quist is quite an individual. Montana, I call him a true cowboy, true poet, philosopher, cowboy. And from what I do know of him, that I think that description is apt. But Montana being so sparsely populated, it is only one district for the whole state. And I believe it was Maddow or somebody gave more of a coverage for the Republican running. But let's talk about Quist and then talk about his possibilities of being able to secure a seat in a state that I think is quite an interesting state. So I'll let you go on about that.
Yeah, so Montana is an interesting state. A lot of people look at these states like Montana and they just say, oh, that's, the West and there's not a chance for a Democrat to win. Well, Montana has a Democratic governor and a Democratic senator in John Tester.
Yep.
And their Democratic governor won last November over the Republican in a race where, Trump won their state pretty handily, but did not get around. Didn't get around, beating this guy, and so
right.
that's a good sign for them. Now, their whole thing of what happens next is can Quist win? Well, that's going to be tricky, but it's not impossible. Rod Quist is, by all accounts, by every account, a cowboy's cowboy. He is. He's been there for 40 years doing the song and dance show to every county fair, every local event, every Montana. Everybody and their dog knows the guy. And more than that, he's, been involved in their local civic activities. So when it came around time to choose who would run for Congress, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, who the heck is this guy? He's not politically involved, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And there were some people who were like, he was a burning person, or, he's really progressive. But if you talk to the locals, most of the locals will tell you, well, this is the guy who helped us round up cattle. This is the guy who, came and, walked through our county fair. So it's just one of those, sometimes, that old mantra of I actually know somebody. If you've actually met somebody, it's hard to vilify them. That really applies to him. So when their state convention met and they considered several really good candidates, the former governor, Brian Schweitzer, spoke, he had already endorsed Quist and basically said, nobody can say this guy isn't Montana. And that was the message that resonated. The message that really went over there was, people want something different. They don't want the same old, and they can attack us on democratic values, but nobody can attack this guy on, he's not, an honest to God, cowboy good for Montana. And, it's a long shot race. There's no doubt about that, but it's one where I think it's a much better shot with him in the race because it changes the discussion. You can't attack him for traditional Democratic, he was in the state house and he did this and that. And most of the stories about him, even from Republicans, are going to be, well, he's that good guy, who
Right.
came and raised money for us. And he didn't raise it because he has tons of money. He raised it because he came and sang for a day. And there's something to like about that. When we were at the DNC meeting, I had several people approach me, and they were telling me, you've got to watch out for Rob Quist. They were like, this could be really interesting. And they started sending me information, and I was like, this could be fun. It could be, win or lose. He is likely to run against a tech multimillionaire who got into trouble in Montana for public lands and then made sweeping claims that Facebook, didn't choose
Right.
Montana because of tax schemes and got busted on it. So he's running against a guy with kind of a checkered background, big wig, corporate city. And it's a great contrast, I think, to have the Republicans run somebody who is seen as the big shot corporate, guy versus
Right.
Democrats running, the down home cowboy. And I think that throws off a whole lot of the normal narrative used against us.
Well, it sounds on some level quixotic, but on another level, perfectly in tune with the way I've always thought Montana politics, this history. It resonates more with that, and it might be just what Montana needs and what the Democratic Party needs, a little shot in the arm from the West there. So
I think
Okay.
it'll energize some people.
yeah.
So
All right, Chris. Well, we'll visit with you next week, and we'll talk to you then. Thanks.
sounds good.
All right,
Right.
folks, we better bug out of here. We got Tom Hartman coming up, of course, about 6 minutes after the hour. In the interim, we'll listen to Stina Nordenstad's Crime. That's a little interlude there. And stay tuned to the rest of the day to Netroots Radio. In fact, why don't you stay tuned 24/7, 365? And why? Because who loves you, baby? Okay, Wink, I will see you on the other side.
All right. We're out.